The bright Arizona sun streamed into my spacious living room, creating intricate patterns on the antique rug I'd bought while my husband Edward was still alive. I turned 73 today, but I didn't feel my age in my heart. Perhaps it was the habit of keeping my back straight and always looking people in the eye. Qualities developed over 3 decades of managing the Roland Jewelers chain of jewelry stores. Sighing, I adjusted my favorite picture on the mantel. Edward was smiling a bright smile I'd never seen on anyone else. He'd passed away when our daughter Prudence was only 12, a heart attack. So ridiculous, so sudden, and so devastating to our family. "We made it through, Eddie," I whispered, running my finger along the frame. It was damn hard at times, though. After my husband died, I had to learn a new reality from scratch. A reality where I not only had to feed and clothe our daughter, but also make all the decisions alone. At the time of Edward's death, I was only the manager of one of the stores in a small but promising chain of jewelry salons called Roland Jewels. Edward was the main founder, and I knew the business only superficially. The first year after his death was a real ordeal. I felt myself drowning in an ocean of responsibility and grief. The board of directors wanted to sell the company, believing that without Edward the business would not survive. But I stubbornly stood my ground. I didn't need the money as much as I needed to keep the business my husband had started. Besides, it was the only stability I could cling to. I rose from manager to deputy director, and then to director of the entire chain, which by then had 7 stores across Arizona. Every step was a struggle. Each promotion was accompanied by doubts from male colleagues. Some thought I was only given the position out of pity as the founder's widow. Others openly said that a woman could not cope with running such a company. But I did. When I retired 5 years ago, Roland Jewels had 12 stores in 3 states and a reputation as one of the most reliable regional jewelry chains. The doorbell interrupted my musings. I knew who it was. Only my daughter could arrive unannounced on a weekday. "Mom!" Prue burst into the house like a hurricane as soon as I opened the door. Tall, slender, with the same red hair I had when I was young, she was dazzlingly beautiful in her sky blue designer suit. "Hello, darling." I kissed her cheek. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" "Oh, Mom, I have amazing news." Prue threw off her high-heeled shoes and walked into the living room, sitting down in my favorite chair. Guess what happened? I mentally went through the options. A new job? Unlikely. My daughter had changed a dozen jobs in her 38 years, none of them for more than a year. Last I heard, she was working at an advertising agency. Promotion? I don't think so. Prue's never been a hard worker, preferring to get everything at once, without much effort. "I don't know, honey. You tell me." "I'm getting married!" she exclaimed, holding out her hand with a massive diamond ring on her ring finger. I froze. This was something I hadn't expected. Prue had never talked about a serious relationship. She'd had men in her life, lots of them, but they changed so often that I'd stopped remembering their names. "Congratulations," I said cautiously. "Who is he?" "Clive Huxley. You must have heard of him. His family owns that huge chain of electronics stores, Huxley Electronics. We met at a charity event last month, and it was love at first sight." I frowned. Something about this situation didn't seem right to me. Prue usually dated men for months before introducing them to me. And here, an engagement after a month of dating, and the name Huxley was familiar, but not in a positive context. "Prue, darling, this is so, sudden. You've only known each other a month?" "Oh, Mom, when you know it's your destiny, time doesn't matter," she said. "Clive is amazing, smart, caring, and so generous. Look at the ring he gave me." I took a closer look at her hand and noticed that the stone, though large, had a noticeable yellowish tint and a few inclusions. Such diamonds are usually 2 or 3 times cheaper than perfectly clean stones. Of course, an ordinary person wouldn't notice it, but I've been in the jewelry business for over 30 years. "It's very beautiful." I smiled, deciding not to spoil my daughter's mood. "When will I meet your Clive?" "Very soon. We're having a little dinner for the family this Friday. You must come, Mother." "Of course, dear," I nodded. "When is the wedding planned?" Prue's face lit up with an excitement I hadn't seen since she was a little girl and got a long-awaited doll for Christmas. "2 months from now. I know it's very soon, but we've already found the perfect place. Palm Valley Country Club." It has such gorgeous gardens and a lake with swans, and the venue just opened up because another wedding was canceled. 2 months? It usually takes about a year to organize a decent wedding. Something's not right here. 2 months is a very short time, Prue. Are you sure you have time to organize? Oh, Mom, don't worry. I've already found an amazing wedding planner, Chloe Brightwood. She's worked with a lot of celebrities. Of course, her services don't come cheap, but nothing's too cheap for the big day, right? An alarm bell rang inside me. Every time Prue started talking like that, it meant she was going to ask for money. Not a month had gone by since she'd moved out on me at 23 without her coming to me for financial help. It was for a new car, or for a vacation, or for the continuing education courses she never finished. I always supported her, thinking I was doing it out of love. But over the years, I began to realize that my generosity wasn't doing her any good. Prue never learned to live within her means and make responsible decisions. But every time I tried to talk to her about it, she either took offense or promised to improve. But she never changed. Yes, a wedding is an important event, I agreed cautiously. But it's just as important to make it fit your capabilities. What are you talking about, Mom? Prue looked at me puzzled. Clive has a great business and well, you've been saving your whole life. I'm your only daughter, and this is my first marriage. Don't you want everything to be perfect? I took a good look at my daughter. Does she really think I should pay for her wedding? It had never been discussed in our family that I would shoulder such an expense. Moreover, Prue had always proudly asserted her independence, even though she regularly accepted my financial assistance. Prue, dear, I want your day to be special. But we need to discuss the budget and who's going to pay for what. Mom, don't be so petty. Prue pouted her lips like she used to do as a child when she didn't get what she wanted. I know you have money. You sold your share of the company when you retired. What are you doing with it? Sitting in that old house, not going anywhere, not buying anything. I could feel the irritation building up inside of me. Yes, I had savings and a good pension, but that didn't mean I had to pay for my great-age daughter's every whim. We'll talk about this after I've met Clive, I said firmly. For now, let's just enjoy your engagement. Tell me more about him. What does he do in the family business? Prue calmed down a bit and began to talk enthusiastically about her fiancé. But the more I listened, the more anxious I became. Clive Huxley, according to Prue, was the heir to the family business, a lover of expensive cars and exotic travel. He took my daughter to the most expensive restaurants in town and gave her designer clothes. Yet Prue didn't mention anything about his education, interests, or values. When she finally left, promising to send me the address of the restaurant for Friday night dinner, I sat back in my chair and thought. Something about this situation bothered me. Perhaps I was being overly suspicious, or maybe I just didn't want to admit that my little girl had grown up. But I couldn't escape the thought that Clive Huxley wasn't who he said he was. The bell rang at exactly 8 in the morning. I'd just made myself a fresh cup of coffee and was about to enjoy the quiet of the early morning on the veranda. After a sleepless night spent thinking about Prue's news, I needed to get my thoughts together. Mom, you won't believe it! My daughter's voice was ringing with excitement. We found the perfect wedding dress! I glanced at my watch. The stores didn't open for another hour. Prue, it's only 8 in the morning. What stores are open at this hour? Oh, this is no ordinary store. This is Veronica Shade's private salon. She opened it just for me. You have to come and see it. It's amazing, Veronica Shade. It's a name I've heard even in our humble surprise. A designer whose dresses were worn by Hollywood celebrities and politicians' wives. Her creations rarely cost less than $20,000. Honey, are you sure you want to spend that much money on a dress? I asked cautiously. Mom, don't start. It's my wedding. And besides, the salon is having a special offer right now. Only $25,000. Only. I sighed. You could buy a decent car for that kind of money. Prue, we haven't discussed the budget yet. I know, but this is an opportunity. We can talk about it tonight at dinner. You haven't forgotten, have you? 7 at Marcello's. Marcello's is one of the most expensive places in town. I stifled a sigh. Of course you remembered. I'll be there. That's great. And Mom? Prue's voice became a little ingratiating. Can you wear something decent? You know, not those old-fashioned suits of yours. How about that blue dress I gave you for Christmas? That dress, which cost a fortune, was too revealing and frankly inappropriate for a woman my age. I'd only worn it once so as not to offend my daughter, and I felt terribly embarrassed. We'll see, I said evasively. I'll see you tonight, darling. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. My conversation with Dorothy last night had only increased my anxiety. According to her, Huxley Electronics had indeed once been a successful business. But things had gone from bad to worse in recent years. Online commerce had hit the electronics retailer hard, and the company had already closed nearly half of its locations. Moreover, there were rumors of serious debts. As for Clive himself, Dorothy didn't know him personally, but she had heard that he was known in certain circles as a spender and a lover of the beautiful life. If rumors were to be believed, his father had gotten his son out of debt several times before, but had eventually grown tired of it and had cut his allowance considerably. Of course, the rumors could have been exaggerated or not true at all. But I'd been in the business too long not to trust my instincts, and they were telling me that something wasn't adding up in Prue and Clive's story. That evening, I wore my favorite dark maroon fine wool suit. Elegant, expensive, but not flashy. Knowing my daughter, I'd arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early so I could get a first impression of Clive without Prue's influence. Marcello's was located in a remodeled historic building downtown. The interior, with heavy velvet curtains, crystal chandeliers, and antique furniture, created an atmosphere of old-fashioned luxury. Ms. Rowland? The maitre d' bowed when he recognized me. Mr. Huxley's expecting you. Let me show you out. I was surprised that Clive had arrived before me. It was a good sign. At least he understood the importance of punctuality. Clive Huxley was a tall man of about 45, with light gray on his temples and impeccably styled hair. He was dressed in a dark blue suit, which even from a distance looked expensive and well-made. When the maitre d' brought me to my table, Clive stood up, showing good manners. Ms. Rowland, what an honor to finally meet you. His voice was deep and well-pitched. Prue has told me so much about you. Likewise, Mr. Huxley, I smiled, shaking his hand. The handshake was firm but not excessive. Another plus. Please call me Clive. He helped me sit down and returned to his seat. Prue will be here soon, she called a few minutes ago. There's a little problem with the parking lot. It gives us a chance to get to know each other a bit, I nodded. Prue tells me you work in the family business? Yes, Huxley Electronics is a third-generation family business. Clive sounded proud. My grandfather started with one small radio store in the 50s, and today we have a chain of 23 stores in 6 states. Impressive, I nodded. What's your role in the company? I'm in charge of strategic development and new markets, Clive answered, but his eyes flashed for a moment with something akin to uncertainty. Of course, the retail electronics market is going through some tough times at the moment because of the competition with the online giants, but we're finding new niches. Like what? I smiled innocently. We're developing the smart home and personal technology consulting business. This gives us a competitive advantage over online retailers. It sounded good, but it was too smooth, as if memorized. I was about to ask another question when a panting Prue came to the table. Mom! Clive! Sorry I'm late. She leaned over to kiss first me on the cheek, then Clive on the lips. The parking lot is a nightmare. That's okay, honey. Clive stood up, helping her sit down. Your mom and I were just getting acquainted. Oh, wonderful! Prue was radiant with happiness. And what do you think of my mom? Isn't she amazing for her age? I suppressed the urge to roll my eyes. Tact has never been my daughter's strong suit. Your mother is adorable at any age, Clive replied diplomatically. I've heard many impressive things about her career in the jewelry business. The dinner continued in a similar vein. Clive was impeccably polite, showed interest in my past career, and asked pertinent questions. Had it not been for my natural suspicion and the information from Dorothy, I might have believed in his image of a successful businessman. However, there were small details that scratched my perception. The way he, when ordering wine, first asked for a very expensive bottle and then, after glancing at the price, quickly changed his choice to something more affordable. Or the way he flinched slightly when Prue ordered the most expensive dish on the menu without looking at the price. So when's the big wedding? Clive asked as we moved on to dessert. Prue says she wants to do something special. June 23rd. We've already booked the Palm Valley Country Club, Prue announced enthusiastically. Oh, Mom, you should see the place. There's a chapel right on the lakeside where we'll have the ceremony, followed by dinner and dancing in the main room. That sounds wonderful, I nodded. And it must be expensive. It's a special day, Clive shrugged. Though I'd suggested to Prue something a little more intimate. Intimate? Clive, we can't celebrate our wedding in some dull restaurant. Prue was outraged. It's our day. I noticed Clive wince slightly, but quickly put a smile back on his face. Of course, darling. I was just thinking that if we'd chosen something less grandiose, we could have spent the money we'd saved on a longer honeymoon. Oh, about the honeymoon. Prue's eyes lit up. I was told today that a presidential villa has become available at Paradise Corner in Bali. 3 weeks in paradise. Now I could definitely see Clive going pale. Paradise Corner was one of the most expensive resorts in the world. A presidential villa there must have cost astronomical sums of money. Prue, dear, I decided to interject. Maybe we should decide on a wedding budget first before booking expensive resorts. Oh, Mom, you and your budget again, Prue rolled her eyes. Don't you realize that a wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime experience? Twice, I automatically corrected. You were married to Ethan. Prue's face changed instantly. Her first marriage had lasted only 8 months and ended in a scandalous divorce when it was discovered that Ethan had been cheating on her. Since then, Prue preferred to pretend that episode didn't exist in her life. It was a long time ago and it doesn't count, she cut off. I didn't know you were married. Clive looked surprised. Because it doesn't matter, Prue brushed it aside. I was young and stupid. He turned out to be nothing. End of story. The atmosphere at the table became noticeably tense. I regretted having brought it up. The awkward silence was interrupted by a phone call. Clive pulled his cell phone out of his pocket, glanced at the screen, and frowned. I'm sorry, it's Dad. I need to take this. He got up from the table and stepped aside. As soon as he was out of hearing range, Prue leaned over to me. What are you doing, Mom? Why did you mention Ethan? I didn't mean to upset you, honey. It's just that this will actually be your second wedding. So what? Are you trying to ruin my relationship with Clive? Of course not, I sighed. I'm just concerned about how quickly things are moving. You've only known each other for a month and already you're planning a wedding for... I left the question hanging in the air. About 350,000, Prue muttered, looking away. Give or take. It's a little more than we'd originally planned, but the Palm Valley Club raised the prices, and Clive insisted on Dom Perignon champagne for the toast. It took my breath away. $350,000. It was an astronomical sum. You could buy a house in the Sierra Club with that money, and my daughter was going to spend it on one day. Prue, this is crazy, I breathed out. Who's going to pay for all this? We thought you'd take care of most of the expenses. Prue said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. You always said you only wanted what was best for me, and Clive's family will pay for the honeymoon. I didn't know what to say. Of course I had savings, good savings, but even for me, $350,000 was a lot of money. And it wasn't even the money. It was the fact that Prue took it for granted that I had to pay for her extravagant wedding. We should discuss it, I finally said, more thoroughly, and with specific numbers. What's there to discuss? Prue shrugged. I've already advanced almost all the vendors. The photographer, the florist, the caterer. You've already paid them? I could feel the anxiety building inside of me. Well, technically, I've made deposits on my credit card. Prue looked a little embarrassed. I knew you'd agree anyway, so why waste time with unnecessary discussions? At that moment, Clive returned and the conversation was interrupted. I could tell by the tense look on his face that the phone call with his father hadn't been pleasant. Is everything all right? Prue asked. Yeah, just a little family business. He smiled strainedly. So what were you two talking about? The wedding budget, I decided to be direct. Prue mentioned $350,000. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, Clive looked caught off guard. Although, as I told Prue, we could cut some costs without sacrificing quality. Clive, my daughter was indignant. We've already talked it over. I don't want cheap flowers and a banal cake. Darling, I'm not talking about cheap flowers, Clive said carefully. But maybe we don't need to order orchids from Hawaii. The local flowers are beautiful too. I watched this exchange with growing concern. It was obvious that Clive recognized the insanity of such spending and was trying to curb Prue's appetites. But then why was he giving her such expensive gifts? Or proposing with a ring like that? Something wasn't adding up here. In any case, we'll need to have a more detailed conversation about the financial side of things, I said firmly. In the next few days. Of course, Ms. Rowland, Clive nodded. I'm all for transparency in these matters. The rest of the dinner passed in a strained atmosphere. Prue sulked, Clive was tense, and I tried to digest everything I'd learned. As we said goodbye outside the restaurant, Clive politely kissed my hand. It was a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Rowland. I hope to see you again soon. Likewise, I nodded. By the way, say hello to your father. I hear Robert Huxley is a very respected man in business circles. Clive's face contorted for a split second, and I realized I'd hit the mark. Something was wrong with his relationship with his father. The next day, I decided to do my own investigation. Dorothy introduced me to Helen Griffin, who had once worked in the finance department of Huxley Electronics. We met for lunch at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Helen was a thin woman with piercing eyes and a sharp tongue. She had worked for the company for almost 20 years before retiring 2 years ago. Huxley Electronics? She hummed when I asked the question. Yes, it used to be a great company. Robert Huxley is a real old-school businessman, but the last few years have been tough. Competition with online retailers, the pandemic. They've closed nearly a third of their stores. What about Clive Huxley? I asked cautiously. What's his role in the company? Helen snorted. Role is a bit of a mouthful. Technically, he's the vice president of strategic development. In fact, he's a perpetual disappointment to his father. Clive had never shown any real interest in the family business. He preferred spending money to earning it. But he had his own money, I asked. He did. Robert had set up a trust fund for his son, which he'd gotten when he was 30. It was rumored to be about $3 million. Clive had managed to squander that money in 5 years on expensive cars, travel, and dubious investments. And now? Now he's totally dependent on his company salary and occasional help from his father. But last year, there was a major scandal. Clive took a corporate credit card on a business trip to Las Vegas and spent almost $50,000 in the casino. Robert was furious. He had almost fired his son and had kept him on a very short leash ever since. I felt a chill run down my spine. A picture was beginning to emerge. Clive is an heir with no inheritance, living beyond his means and desperate for money. And then he meets Prue, my only daughter, who he surely knows could have access to my savings. If you don't mind me asking, Helen interrupted my musings, why are you interested in Clive Huxley? He's engaged to my daughter, I answered, and my voice sounded muffled. They are to be married in 2 months, a $350,000 wedding. Helen choked on her tea. I'm sorry, she mumbled, blotting her lips with a napkin. It's just, that sounds a lot like Clive. Grandiose plans with no real means of realizing them. She was silent for a moment, then added in a softer tone. If you ask me, your daughter should think twice about this marriage. Clive is not a bad man, but he will never grow out of his role as a spoiled boy looking for easy ways. I thanked Helen for her honesty and information. On the way home, I pondered my next steps. Obviously, I needed to talk to Prue and tell her everything I'd learned. But my daughter had never been known for her good judgment, especially when she was in love. And judging by her behavior, she really was smitten with Clive. The following weeks became a wedding whirlwind. My house was filled with fabric swatches, floral catalogs, invitation layouts, and endless lists. Prue arrived almost every day with new ideas and requests. I watched this madness with a mixture of anxiety and bewilderment. All my life I had been practical and rational. Even my own wedding to Edward, despite the fact that we both came from well-to-do families, had been modest and elegant. We decided to spend the money on buying a house rather than on one lavish day. And I never regretted that decision. But Prue was always different. She loved glitz and glitter, loud gestures and expensive things. Ever since she was a little girl, she dreamed of princes and castles, of dresses with long trails and crystal shoes. I thought it would go away as she got older, but it turns out that my daughter just learned to hide her childhood fantasies behind a facade of adult confidence and businesslikeness. Mom, you have to see these amazing candelabras. Prue burst into the house waving her clipboard. They'll look perfect on the tables. How much do they cost? I asked tiredly, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Only 3,000 a set. We'll need 20 sets, Prue said as casually as if she were talking about buying a new pair of socks. $60,000 for candlesticks? I shook my head incredulously. Prue, that's crazy. These aren't just candlesticks, Mom. They're works of art. They're handmade, each one unique. They're made by a famous glassblower in Venice. And they'll be used once for one night. I tried to appeal to common sense. We can sell them after the wedding, or keep them as keepsakes, Prue parried. Where would we keep them? They'll take up a whole room. Oh my God, Mom, you always make everything so complicated. Prue threw the clipboard away irritably. Clive thinks it's a great idea. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Prue, I want your wedding to be special, but we need to be reasonable. $350,000 is a huge amount of money. Lots of people spend more than that on weddings, Prue pouted. A lot of people also have enough money for that, I objected gently. Or they save up for years. You want to do it all in 2 months and at my expense. Prue stood up and paced the room nervously. I knew you'd react this way. You've always been so stingy. Even when you had money, you never let me have what the other girls had. It was so unfair. It took my breath away. I always gave Prue everything I could. A good education, nice clothes, traveling, the opportunity to play any sport or art she liked. She never knew denial for the things she needed. But yeah, I didn't buy her designer handbags when she was 13 or give her a car for her 16th birthday like some of her friends' parents did. Prue, let's not talk about the past right now. Let's talk about the present. I tried to get the conversation back on track. I can allocate a certain amount of money for the wedding. Let's say 100,000. That's still very generous. But if you want something bigger, you and Clive are going to have to cover the rest of the costs yourselves. Prue's face contorted with anger. 100,000? Are you kidding me? We can't even rent a place for the ceremony for that kind of money. She grabbed the clipboard and began frantically flipping through the files. Here, look. The Palm Valley rental alone is 75,000. And there's food, drinks, flowers, music, photographers, videographer, dress. Well, maybe we should go someplace less expensive, I suggested. There are many beautiful wedding venues in the Sierra Pres. Oasis Park, for example, or… Park? You're suggesting I get married in a park? Prue looked like I was suggesting she have the ceremony in the city dump. With all the local homeless and junkies staring at us? There are no homeless people in Oasis Park, Prue. I was starting to lose my patience. It's a private landscaped park with a beautiful lake and gazebos. Your friend Lisa got married there 2 years ago, and it was beautiful. Lisa married a plumber, shouted Prue. I'm marrying Clive Huxley. It's a whole other level. I barely restrained myself from saying that. In fact, Jack the plumber probably had a more stable income than her precious Clive Huxley, who was mired in debt. But I knew that would only make her angrier. Prue, let's be realistic. Neither you nor Clive have that kind of money. And I can't spare more than 100 grand, I said calmly and firmly. I've got to think about my old age, the medical expenses I might have. Oh, don't start that song. Prue threw up her hands. You're healthy as a horse, and you have health insurance. You just don't want to spend your precious money on my wedding. It's not that I don't want to, it's that I can't. I tried to stay calm. 100,000 is my limit. Prue looked at me with such disappointment and anger that for a moment I felt guilty. Maybe I really had been too harsh. Maybe I should have sold some of my investment and given her that 350,000. But immediately I reprimanded myself. No, that would be wrong. It would only reinforce the idea that she could get whatever she wanted just by pushing me around. Besides, I had serious doubts about Clive and his motives. You know what, Mom? Prue's voice snapped me out of my reverie. It's okay. I understand. Her tone was suddenly suspiciously soft. Clive and I will figure something out. Maybe his parents can help more than they'd planned. That abrupt shift from anger to humility alerted me. Prue never gave up so easily, especially when it came to something she really wanted. Did she? I couldn't hide my disbelief. Yes. Prue smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. After all, it's just money, right? The important thing is that Clive and I love each other. I nodded, but inside me everything clenched with anxiety. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. My suspicions were confirmed the very next day when I received a call from the bank manager. Ms. Rowland? This is Victoria Ellison from First National. We had some questions about some recent activity in your account. What activity? I felt the blood drain from my face. There have been several large transfers from your account in the last 2 weeks. The total amount is $225,000. Given that this is atypical for your spending profile, we wanted to make sure these transactions were authorized by you. I got dizzy. $225,000? I've never transferred that amount of money. No, I did not authorize these transfers. In whose name were they made? Prudence Rowland, the manager said. According to our records, she has a power of attorney to manage your account. Did you sign such a power of attorney? I closed my eyes, feeling the anger building up inside. Yes, I had signed that power of attorney years ago when I had heart surgery. At the time, it had seemed like a sensible precaution to let Prue handle my finances in case something happened to me. But I never envisioned her using it without my explicit request. Yes, the power of attorney does exist, but I didn't authorize my daughter to make those transfers, I said firmly. Is it possible to cancel them? Unfortunately, most of them have already been processed, Victoria replied regretfully. But we can freeze your account to prevent further unauthorized transfers and start an investigation. No, we don't need an investigation, I said quickly. This is a family matter. I'll handle it myself. But yes, please block the account from further transactions without my personal presence at the bank. After the call, I sat stunned by my daughter's betrayal. $225,000. She just took it without even asking me, even after I had clearly stated my limit of $100,000. I dialed her number, but the call went straight to voicemail. I sent a text message demanding that she call me back immediately. No response. It wasn't until that evening that Prue showed up on my doorstep. She didn't look the least bit remorseful. You blocked your bank account. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And you stole $225,000 from me, I countered. I didn't steal. Prue was indignant. I have a power of attorney, which was for emergencies, not to finance your wedding. I rarely raise my voice, but now I could barely contain myself. Especially after I made it clear I couldn't give you more than $100,000. Prue crossed her arms over her chest. You just don't realize how important this is to me. This is my only wedding. The second, I corrected myself. The first real one, Prue insisted. And you have to help me. You're my mother. Yes, I am your mother. But that doesn't mean I have to pay for your every whim. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. Prue, I love you, and I want you to be happy. But this wedding, too fast, too expensive, too reckless. And Clive. Don't you dare talk about Clive, Prue cut me off. You don't know him at all. He loves me, not my money, unlike what you're trying to make me believe. Then why is he letting you spend that kind of money on a wedding? If he really loves you, wouldn't he prefer a modest ceremony and a chance to start a life together without debt? Because, unlike you, he understands how important this is to me, shouted Prue. And he knows you can afford it. You're just greedy and selfish. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. After everything I'd done for her, all the sacrifice, all the love, all the support, she thought I was greedy and selfish? I want that money back, I said quietly but firmly. Too late, Prue smirked. Most of it's already spent on deposits. Everything is ready for the wedding. On June 23rd, I'm marrying Clive in Palm Valley, and it's going to be the most beautiful wedding this snooty little town has ever seen. Then you'd better find a way to pay for the rest of it yourself. I felt something harden inside. Because I'm not giving a dime more. Prue laughed, but there was no mirth in her laugh. You will. Because you don't want your only daughter embarrassed in front of the whole town when the wedding is disrupted by unpaid bills. Think of your reputation, Mom. What will people say? With those words, she turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. I sank into the chair feeling devastated. Prue was right about one thing. I really didn't want her to embarrass herself. Not because I cared what the townspeople thought, but because no matter what, she was my daughter and I loved her. But I also realized that if I gave in to her blackmail now, it would never end. She would continue to manipulate me, using money and emotion to get whatever she wanted. Over the next week, I tried several more times to talk to Prue, but she either ignored my calls or replied with short messages saying she was too busy with wedding preparations. I found out through my friend Dorothy that Prue was telling everyone that I was happily paying for her wedding and that Clive and I were getting along just fine. It was all a lie, but I didn't publicly refute what she said. Instead, I made a decision. A hard, painful, but necessary one. On my wedding day, June 23rd, I woke up early. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon and the reception for 6. I called my bank and informed them that I wanted to recall any payments that had not yet been processed and block any future transactions related to Prue's wedding. I then called the Palm Valley Club and explained the situation to the manager. He was polite but adamant. Without full payment, which was due this morning, the event would not take place. I realized that after this, Prue would probably never forgive me. But I also knew that continuing to indulge her irresponsibility would be worse. Sometimes love means being able to say no, even if it hurts. At 10 in the morning, I turned off my cell phone and left the house. I couldn't be there when the inevitable storm hit. The morning of June 23rd was surprisingly clear and cool for Arizona. I woke up long before dawn, having not slept a wink most of the night. The thought of what I was about to do weighed heavily on my heart, but I knew I had no choice. At 6:30, I was already sitting at my antique secretary, looking through a folder of financial documents. Inside were details of all the payments Prue had arranged using my power of attorney. Most of the vendors required full payment on the day of the event, and only a fraction of the money had been paid as a deposit. I picked up my phone and methodically, one by one, started calling all the people listed on the paperwork. Florists, catering, musicians, photographers, parking service, marquee and furniture company. I said the same thing to everyone. Good afternoon, this is Sylvia Rowland. I'm canceling the payment scheduled for today. You may keep the deposit as compensation for the inconvenience. Some were annoyed, some surprised, but most just politely accepted the information. After all, it was just business as usual. Customers sometimes cancel orders. Last on my list was the Palm Valley Country Club itself. I waited until 8 o'clock when administration was due and dialed their number. Palm Valley Country Club, how may I help you? A polite female voice answered the phone. Good morning, this is Sylvia Rowland. I'm calling about the wedding scheduled for today. The wedding of Prudence Rowland and Clive Huxley. Yes, Ms. Rowland, the wedding is scheduled for 4 o'clock this afternoon. Is something wrong? I'm afraid the event will have to be canceled. I'm withdrawing the funding. There's a pause on the other end of the line. Ms. Rowland, do you realize that canceling on the day of the event means a total loss of deposit? And that the contract requires a minimum of 7 days' notice? Yes, I understand, I replied calmly. And I'm not asking for a refund of the deposit. But I will not make the remaining payment that was due today. You need to speak with our events manager, Ms. Kerrigan. May I transfer your call? Of course, I agreed. After a few minutes on hold, accompanied by soft music, another female voice, deeper and more businesslike, came on. Ms. Rowland, this is Fiona Kerrigan, events manager. I hear you're having some problems with your daughter's wedding? Not a problem, Ms. Kerrigan. It's a decision. I'm canceling the event and withdrawing the funding. This is very sudden. Her voice sounded concerned. We've already begun preparations. The staff is in place. The decorators will be here within the hour. I understand, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but my decision is final. I tried to speak firmly. Ms. Rowland, perhaps you should discuss this with your daughter. She was here until late last night, checking every detail. She'll be devastated. I know my daughter, Ms. Kerrigan, and I know what I'm doing. Please just take note of my canceled payment. My voice was polite but adamant. The manager tried some more to convince me to change my mind, but finally gave up, promising to notify all involved club employees. As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely relieved. The worst part was over. Now all that was left was to live through the aftermath. I unplugged my phone and put it in my desk drawer. Then I packed a small bag of essentials. I planned to spend the day away from home so Prue wouldn't be able to find me when the inevitable storm hit. At 9 in the morning, I was already parking the car outside a small cottage on the outskirts of town. Dorothy Blackwell, my oldest and most loyal friend, lived there. She was the one person I trusted completely and with whom I could share my worries. "Sylvia!" Dorothy met me on the doorstep. Small, gray-haired, but with lively eyes and energetic movements, she was the opposite of the typical old lady. "Come in quickly, I just put the kettle on." We settled into her cozy kitchen. The sun cast a warm glow on the room, creating an illusion of calm that I didn't feel at all. "You look awful," Dorothy said bluntly, pouring my tea. "I take it you've made up your mind after all?" I nodded, wrapping my arms around the cup as if trying to keep warm. "I canceled the whole thing, just an hour ago." Dorothy whistled. "Wow, I didn't think you had the guts." "Do you think I did the wrong thing?" I looked up at her. "No, honey, I think you did exactly the right thing. But I know how much you love Prue, despite all her faults. And I know how hard this must be for you." I felt a lump rise in my throat. Dorothy was right. I loved my daughter. I'd loved her from the first time I'd held her tiny body in my arms in the hospital. Loved when she took her first steps, when she went to school, when she rebelled as a teenager. Loved even when she disappointed me with her decisions and actions in adulthood. She was a part of me, the best part, the only child Edward and I could conceive after years of trying, and today I'd hurt her, intentionally. "I don't know if she'll ever forgive me," I said quietly. "Maybe not," Dorothy answered honestly. "But sometimes love means doing what's right, not what feels good. You tried to reason with her in other ways. She wouldn't listen." "Yes, but to cancel the wedding on the very day—" I shook my head. "Maybe I should have tried talking to her again? And what would have changed?" Dorothy took a sip of tea. "Prue had never been good at listening. She always got what she wanted just by throwing a tantrum or manipulating you. It was time to put an end to that. I knew she was right, but that didn't ease the pain and guilt." "What about this Clive guy?" Dorothy asked, setting the cup on the table. "Do you really think he's only with her for the money?" "Not only, but it's a big part of the equation," I sighed. "He's up to his eyeballs in debt. His father has him on a tight leash. And then Prue shows up with her idea of a lavish wedding paid for by her rich mom. It was perfect for him. But why would he agree to spend so much money? If he's really in debt, wouldn't it make more sense to suggest a modest ceremony?" "Because he knows Prue. She would never agree to a simple wedding." I smiled weakly. "And maybe he was hoping that some of the money I'd give for the wedding could be used to pay off his debts." "What a lovely couple," Dorothy said sarcastically. "They deserve each other." "Prue isn't a bad person, Dorothy." I felt the need to protect my daughter. "He's just spoiled, and it's my fault. I always gave her everything she wanted. After Edward died, I felt so guilty for her, for being without a father, for spending so much time at work. I made up for it with material things and rarely said no. And this is the result," Dorothy nodded. "But now you've finally done what you should have done years ago. Better late than never, right?" I didn't answer. Thoughts of what was happening at Palm Valley now kept me busy. It was already 11:30. Prue probably knows by now that something's wrong, that all the vendors are refusing to work without payment, that the club won't be hosting the event. How did she react? Crying, screaming, blaming everyone around her? Or is she already trying to find me to get me to change my mind? "Do you want to turn on the phone?" Dorothy asked, as if reading my mind. "No," I shook my head. "It's not time yet. I'm not ready to talk to her. Not now." "Then why don't we do something to distract you?" A friend suggested it. "I have a new 2,000-piece puzzle. Or we could watch that TV show I was telling you about." I was grateful to Dorothy for trying to distract me, but I doubted that anything could really take my mind off Prue and the canceled wedding. "Let's try the puzzle," I agreed, nonetheless. We moved into the living room, where Dorothy pulled out a large box with a picture of a flowering garden. We laid the pieces out on the coffee table and began sorting them first by edge, then by color. It was mechanical work requiring little thought and exactly what I needed. But even as I immersed myself in this simple task, I couldn't completely disconnect from reality. My mind kept painting pictures of what was happening in Palm Valley. By now, the news that the wedding had been canceled should have spread among the staff. Perhaps some of the guests who had arrived early or were trying to confirm details had already found out. I imagined the confused faces of the receptionists trying to explain the situation and the shock on the faces of the guests. And what about Clive? How had he reacted to the news? Was he trying to save the day, or had he already disappeared, realizing that without my money, the wedding, and probably his relationship with Prue, had no future? "You're thinking about them again," Dorothy remarked, watching as I fidgeted with the puzzle piece for several minutes. "I can't help thinking," I admitted. "What's going on out there right now?" "Probably total chaos," Dorothy shrugged. "Prue's yelling at everyone, Clive's trying to save face, the guests are confused. But you know what? It's not your problem. You did what you thought was right. Now let them deal with the consequences." But what if Prue really loves him? I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if I ruined her chance at happiness? If she really loves him and he loves her, they'll find a way to be together without a lavish $350,000 wedding, Dorothy said reasonably. True love isn't measured by the cost of floral arrangements or the brand of champagne. I knew she was right, but my doubts still gnawed at me. Fortunately, Dorothy soon distracted me with talk of her grandchildren, a new neighbor who seemed to have installed an illegal antenna on the roof, and the fact that the local supermarket had stopped selling her favorite kind of tea. Time was running out. We had lunch of Dorothy's prepared soup and fresh bread, continued putting together the puzzle, and then decided to watch TV. The local news didn't mention the Palm Valley scandal, which wasn't surprising. Such events didn't usually make the news. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the time the ceremony was supposed to begin, I felt on pins and needles. Part of me wanted to turn on my phone and find out what was going on. The other part was afraid of what I might see there. "Maybe it's time to check it out," Dorothy suggested gently. "You won't rest until you know anyway." I hesitated for a few more minutes, but finally nodded. Dorothy handed me my bag and I pulled out my cell phone. With a heavy heart, I turned it on. The device came to life, and almost immediately it began to vibrate continuously, signaling a slew of missed calls and messages. When the alerts finally stopped, I glanced at the screen. 67 missed calls from Prue, 12 from Clive, 5 from my sister Evelyn, who was supposed to be attending the wedding, and countless text messages. I opened the first message from Prue, sent at 9:30 in the morning. "Mom, what's going on? The florist said you canceled the order. Call me back immediately." The next sent 10 minutes later. "The club says the wedding is canceled. What did you do?" As she read the messages, Prue's tone became more and more panicked, then angry, then pleading, and then angry again. The last message had been sent only 15 minutes ago. "You ruined my life. I will never forgive you for that. Never." Clive's messages were more subdued, but no less insistent. He was asking me to call him back, saying that Prue was hysterical, that the guests had started arriving and needed to be dealt with urgently. My sister Evelyn was just asking what was going on and if I was okay. As I was going through the messages, the phone started vibrating again. Another call from Prue. I looked at Dorothy, who was watching me with concern. "Are you going to answer it?" she asked. I took a deep breath and pressed the accept button. "Prue," I said, bracing myself for the storm. "How could you? How can you?" Prue's voice was so distorted with rage that I barely recognized my daughter. I pulled the phone away from my ear, but even Dorothy sitting across from me could hear every word. "Prue, let's talk calmly," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Calmly? Calm?" She was practically screaming. "You ruined my wedding! You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know, in front of Clive's family, in front of the whole damn town, and you want me to be calm? I understand that you're upset." "Upset?" She sounded hysterical. "I'm not upset, Mom. I'm destroyed. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you ruined it." I took a deep breath, trying to find the words. I knew Prue wasn't in the right state of mind to listen to reasonable arguments, but I had to try to explain. "Prue, you left me no choice. You stole money from my account." "I did not." She interrupted me. "I had a power of attorney, which you used without my permission," I said firmly. after I made it clear that I couldn't give you more than 100,000. It wasn't fair to me, Prue. And canceling my wedding on the day itself was fair? Her voice was oozing venom. You know what happened? The guests arrived at Palm Valley and found the doors locked. Clive's family had flown in from Boston. Some friends had traveled from out of state. And they all had to turn around and leave because my mother was so greedy she couldn't spend a measly $350,000 on her only daughter's wedding. I could feel the irritation building up inside. Despite everything that had happened, Prue still thought $350,000 was miserable money to throw around. It's not about the money, Prue, I said, trying to remain calm. It's about how you approached it. You didn't ask, you demanded. You didn't discuss it, you decided for yourself. And when I said no, you took what you wanted anyway, without regard for my feelings or financial situation. Oh, please, Prue snorted. Don't pretend like you're having financial problems. I know how much you got when you sold your share of the company. You just didn't want to spend it on me. I sighed. Classic Prue. Always saw only what she wanted to see. Where's Clive? I asked, changing the subject. Is he with you? There was a short pause. No, Prue finally answered, her voice trembling slightly. He had to go away. Sort some things out. I raised an eyebrow, looking at Dorothy, who was listening intently to the conversation. So Clive had already escaped. He was quick to show his true intentions. To take care of things, I repeated slowly. On your wedding day, instead of being there for you. Don't you dare judge him! Prue immediately flared up. This is all your fault. If you hadn't organized this sabotage, we'd be celebrating our wedding right now. Prue, my voice softened. I know you're angry and upset right now, and you have a right to be. But I want you to think about it. Is Clive really the man you think he is? The man who leaves you in your darkest hour? He didn't abandon me, she screamed. He's just gone away for a few hours. He'll come back. He loves me. If he loves you, I began cautiously, why didn't he suggest a more modest wedding? Why did he insist on spending so much money when he knew he didn't have any? What do you mean he doesn't have any money himself? Prue's voice became wary. What are you talking about? I realized it was time to tell her the truth. The whole truth about Clive that I'd learned. Prue, the Huxley Company has been in serious financial difficulties for several years. They've closed almost a third of their stores, and Clive himself has long been out of touch with the family fortune. His father severely restricted his finances after Clive spent his $3 million trust fund over 5 years. Where did you? Prue stammered. It's not true. You're making it up to turn me against him. I spoke to Helen Griffin, who worked in the finance department of Huxley Electronics for over 20 years, I explained patiently. She told me that last year Clive took a corporate credit card on a business trip to Las Vegas and blew almost $50,000 in the casino. His father was furious and has kept him on a very short leash ever since. There was silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in Prue's head as she tried to digest this information. Even if it's true, she finally said, but her voice wasn't so sure anymore. It doesn't mean he doesn't love me. Everyone has financial problems. Of course we do, I agreed. But usually people who have financial problems don't insist on a $350,000 wedding. They don't buy expensive rings they can't afford. They don't promise to pay for a honeymoon at the presidential villa in Bali, knowing they don't have the money for it. The ring, Prue muttered. Did you say something about a ring? It's beautiful, I said carefully. But the stone has a noticeable yellowish tint and a few inclusions. Such diamonds cost 2 or 3 times cheaper than perfectly clean ones. To the non-professional eye, the difference is imperceptible, but I have spent more than 30 years in the jewelry business. There was silence again, a longer silence. I could practically see Prue's eyes begin to open to the reality of the situation. He said it was a family heirloom, she finally said in a quiet voice. His grandmother's ring? I closed my eyes. Of course he said that. It saved him from having to explain why the diamond wasn't perfect, and it added a romantic flavor at the same time. Prue, I tried to speak as softly as I could. I understand that you love him, and maybe he does love you, but his attitude toward money? It's dangerous. He's used to living beyond his means, used to someone always saving him from the consequences of his decisions. First it was his father, now he's hoping it'll be me. No. Prue's voice became harder. No, you're wrong. Clive is not like that. He's a successful businessman. He's the vice president of the company. Strategic development, I added. It's an honorary position his father created to give his son a job and some income. But he has no real power in the company. How would you know that? Prue's voice sounded like the desperation of a man grasping at the last straws. I checked, Prue. Because I love you, and I'm worried about your future. Because I didn't want you to marry a man who only sees you as access to my money. But he loves me. Tears welled up in her voice now. He always said I was special. I wanted to hug my daughter, to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I was miles away from her, and all I could give was the truth, no matter how painful it was. Where did you two meet, Prue? I asked. You said at a charity event. Which one? At the Huntington Gallery, she answered after a pause. It was a charity auction for children with cancer. And how did you two get in touch? He came up to me, said he noticed me as soon as he walked in, that I stood out from all the other women. And you introduced yourself as Prudence Rowland? I went on. Yes, of course. She sounded annoyed. Why the questions? Did you mention that I'm your mother? That I'm the former director of Rowland Jewels? The pause became an answer in itself. Yes, I guess so, she said reluctantly. We talked about work, about family, but what's the big deal? Nothing, I said softly. I just want you to see the full picture. Clive, a man with financial problems, meets an attractive woman who, as it turns out, is the daughter of a successful business executive with substantial savings. Suddenly he realizes he is in love and wants to get married after only a month of dating. That's not true, Prue exclaimed, but her voice was no longer as confident as before. You're distorting everything. Maybe I am, I agreed. Maybe I'm wrong, and Clive really does love you for your own sake. But then where is he now, Prue? On a day when you need his support the most? Why isn't he by your side? There was a long silence. I could only hear Prue's quiet breathing on the other end of the line. He said he needed to talk to his father, she finally said. Explain the situation. To ask for help. And how long has he been gone? Since noon. Prue's voice sounded depressed. He left right after we found out the club was canceling the event. 6 hours. Enough time to get to the airport and fly anywhere. Had you tried calling him? I asked cautiously. Of course, Prue exclaimed. 1,000 times. He won't answer. He says he's busy. He does? You mean he's answering your messages? He texted a couple times. Said he'd take care of it, that I didn't have to worry. Classic trick of a man trying to buy time to escape, giving false hope, promising to solve problems without specifying how. Prue, darling, I tried to speak as gently as possible. I think you should prepare yourself for the possibility that Clive won't come back. No. Her voice got louder again. You don't know him like I do. He loves me. He'll come back. Okay, I didn't argue. Where are you now? Are you alone? I'm at the Meridian Hotel, she said. We booked a room to prepare for the ceremony. Are you there alone? Yes. Her voice trembled again. Everyone's gone. The guests, the bridesmaids, no one left. My heart ached for my daughter. Despite all her faults, all her spoiling and selfishness, she was my child, and now she was suffering. I could come over, I suggested. We could talk in person. No, Prue cut me off. I don't want to see you. This whole thing happened because of you. If you'd just given me the money like any normal mother, everything would have been fine. Prue. No, don't come. I will never forgive you for what you did. You ruined the biggest day of my life. You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know. You. Her voice broke and I heard sobs. The real, desperate sobs of someone whose world had just fallen apart. Prue, honey. I felt tears welling up in my own eyes. I know you're angry, and you have a right to be. But I was acting out of the best of intentions. I wanted to protect you. From what? She sobbed. From happiness? From a man who could use you, I said softly. From a marriage that could make you miserable. From a debt that could have ruined your life. My life is already ruined, Prue shouted. And it's your fault. I sighed. It was obvious that Prue wasn't ready to hear the truth. She was still in the denial stage, clinging to the illusion of perfect love and a perfect fiancé. "I'll be here when you're ready to talk," I said. "Just know that I love you, Prue. Always have and always will." "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this," she replied bitterly. "Real love means support, not sabotage. Sometimes love means doing the hard things," I objected quietly. "Even if it hurts." "Goodbye, Mom," Prue said coldly. "Don't call me again." She hung up, leaving me with a ringing in my ear and a heavy weight on my heart. Dorothy, who had been sitting quietly beside me the whole time, put her hand on my shoulder. "Give her time," she said. "She's angry now. But when the anger subsides, she'll begin to see things more clearly." "And if she doesn't?" I looked at my friend, not hiding my fear. "What if she never forgives me?" "She's your daughter, Sylvia. In the end, the blood will take its course." I wanted to believe that, but my doubts gnawed at me. Prue had always been stubborn, and now that she thought I had betrayed her, her wall of resentment might prove insurmountable. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked, feeling lost. "Now? Nothing." Dorothy squeezed my hand. "Give her space. Give her time to realize that Clive isn't coming back. Give her time to realize that you were right. If he's not coming back," I still allowed for the possibility that we were wrong about Clive. "Maybe he did go to his father for help." "Maybe." Dorothy obviously didn't believe it, but she didn't argue. "Either way, time will tell. In the meantime, you need to take care of yourself. Do you want to stay with me tonight?" I shook my head. "Thanks, but I think I'd better get home, in case Prue decides to come after all." "Are you sure?" Dorothy looked worried. She was very angry. "Maybe it would be better to let her cool down." "I have to be home," I insisted. "If she came and didn't find me there, it'll look like I'm hiding, like I did something wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," Dorothy said firmly. "You were protecting your daughter from a bad decision." "I know," I smiled weakly. "But I still feel awful. Like I let her down. It's normal to feel that way. You're a mother. You love her. But trust me, the day will come when she'll realize you did it out of love." I wanted to believe what my friend said. I wanted to believe that I hadn't lost my daughter forever. But the bitterness in Prue's voice, her final goodbye, sounded like a final judgment. I left Dorothy's around 7 that night. All the way home, I thought about Prue, about Clive, about the wedding that was never going to happen. Part of me still doubted the rightness of my decision. Maybe I should have found another way to stop this wedding. Maybe I should have spoken to Clive directly, or to his father. But the other part of me, the more rational part, realized that I'd done the only thing I could do. Prue didn't listen to reason. She was blinded by love, or what she thought was love, and the dream of a lavish wedding. If I didn't stop it today, she would marry a man who was likely using her for money, and that mistake could cost her far more than the canceled wedding. The turquoise waves of the ocean lapped gently on the sand, leaving behind tiny shells and foam. I sat on the small terrace of my new home, sipping my morning coffee and watching my golden retriever buddy chase seagulls along the water's edge. It had been 4 months since that ill-fated day of a failed wedding. 4 months that changed my life completely. The house in Surprise sold 6 weeks after I put it on the market. I was lucky. A young family with 2 kids fell in love with it at first sight and offered a good price. I was excited that the house where most of my life had been spent would get a new life with new people full of hopes and plans. And I had finally decided to fulfill a long-held dream of mine. A dream I've been putting off for years, first because of my career, then because of my responsibility to Prue. A dream of a small house by the ocean where I could spend the sunsets of my life listening to the sound of the surf and breathing in the salty air. The quiet coastal town of Carmel by the Sea in California became my new home. Here, in a small white cottage with blue shutters, just a 3-minute walk from the beach, my new life began. Of course, not everything was easy. Moving at 73 years old is not the easiest task. There was a lot of hassle with transportation of things, paperwork, arrangement of new housing. But every morning waking up to the sound of seagulls and the ocean, I realized that it was worth it. And then there was Buddy. I'd never kept dogs before Edward was allergic, and after he died, I'd always been too busy working. But now that I had time and space, I decided I needed a companion. That's how a 2-year-old golden retriever from a local shelter came into my life. Good-natured, energetic, and endlessly loyal. Buddy was exactly what I needed. He filled the quiet of the house with his presence, kept me going for long walks on the beach, and most importantly, gave me the unconditional love I had been missing lately. Because Prue was still not communicating with me. We hadn't spoken since the night I found her letter. The letter was short and full of bitterness. She wrote that I had betrayed her, that I had ruined the most important day of her life, and that she could never forgive me for that. She also reported that she was going to leave Surprise to start fresh somewhere where she wasn't known as the girl whose wedding was canceled by her mother. I tried to contact her several times, calling, texting, even sending a couple paper letters to her friend Vanessa, who I knew Prue was staying with after the wedding. But all my attempts went unanswered. Only through Dorothy, who kept in touch with some mutual acquaintances, did I learn that Prue had moved to Phoenix and taken a job with some marketing company. In Dorothy's words, my daughter looked holding her own but not happy. As for Clive, as we suspected, he had disappeared. According to rumors, which also reached me through Dorothy, he left the state the day after the failed wedding. No one knew for sure where, but there was talk of Las Vegas or even Mexico. I didn't feel satisfied that I'd been right about him, only sadness that my daughter had been so deeply hurt by his betrayal. And of course, guilt that I had been the one to instigate this painful lesson. But for all the pain, for all the severity of breaking up with Prue, I didn't regret my decision. I knew I'd done the right thing. Marriage to Clive, who was obviously taking advantage of my daughter, would have brought her much more grief in the long run. I hoped that in time, Prue would realize that too. Buddy returned from the beach, wet and happy, interrupting my musings with a joyful bark. I smiled at his antics. "Good boy," I said, scratching him behind the ears. "Let's go inside, it's time for breakfast." My new life was simple and measured. Morning walks with Buddy on the beach, breakfast on the terrace to the sound of the surf, reading books I'd been putting off for years. The occasional lunch with new acquaintances, fellow retirees who had moved to Carmel from around the country. On Tuesdays, I took an art class at the local community center. I had never had time to paint before, although I had shown an interest in it when I was younger. Now, under the guidance of my patient teacher Margaret, I was learning to capture the beauty of coastal landscapes on canvas. My first works were terrible, but with each class I felt progress, and it was especially satisfying. On Thursdays, I volunteered at the local library, helping with cataloging books and occasionally doing readings for children. Seeing the little ones' eyes light up when I read them stories about pirates and princesses, dragons and wizards, was a real medicine for my soul. And on weekends, I would often just sit on the beach, watching the ocean and thinking about life, the past and the future. About how strange the path is, how unexpected twists and turns lead us to where we should be. Today was just such a day, Saturday, clear and warm. After breakfast, I decided to walk to the post office to send a postcard to Dorothy. Despite all the modern technology, she and I preferred old-fashioned correspondence. There was something special about receiving a real letter, written by the hand of a loved one. The post office was a 10-minute walk from my house, in the center of the small town. I loved that walk. Past the neat houses with flowering gardens, past the little stores and cafes where locals and tourists enjoyed the leisurely life by the ocean. When I entered the post office, the elderly clerk, Raymond, smiled welcomingly at me. "Good morning, Ms. Rowland. It's a beautiful day today, isn't it?" "Wonderful, Raymond," I smiled back. "I have a card to send, and if it's not too much trouble, please check my box." "Sure." He accepted the card from me and went to the row of mailboxes at the back of the room. He returned a minute later with a small stack of correspondence. "Invoices, flyers, and one personal letter," he said, handing me the envelopes. I thanked him and went outside, looking through the mail I had received. The personal letter caught my eye. The envelope was plain, white, with no return address. But the postmark clearly read, Las Vegas, Nevada. My heart gave a strange twinge. I didn't know anyone in Las Vegas, except maybe. I hurried home without opening the envelope. Something told me that the contents of this letter were best read in silence and solitude. At home, I settled into my favorite chair on the terrace, Buddy lying at my feet, and I opened the letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar to me, neat, slightly slanted to the right. I began to read. Dear Miss Rowland, you are probably surprised to receive this letter from me, and I understand your possible reluctance to read further. But I beg you to give me a few minutes of your time. My name is Clive Huxley, and I was the fiancé of your daughter Prudence. Since the events of 4 months ago, I have been rethinking a lot of things about my life and my actions. I feel the need to write to you. First of all, I must admit that you were right about many things. My financial situation was indeed not what I had envisioned. My father's company had indeed fallen on hard times, and my access to family funds was severely limited due to my past mistakes. I met Prudence at a time when I was desperately looking for a way out of the situation. After finding out who her mother was, I truly saw an opportunity to solve my problems. It was wrong and unfair to your daughter, but I want you to know that I didn't plan this from the beginning. Your daughter really caught my attention with her beauty and liveliness. I did develop feelings for her, but those feelings mixed with my financial problems to create a toxic cocktail of lies and manipulation that I am now ashamed of. When you canceled the wedding, I was in a panic. All my plans fell apart. I cowardly ran away, unable even to find the strength to say goodbye to Prudence in person. It was cowardly and undignified. After that, I went to Las Vegas, thinking I could quickly improve my financial situation by gambling. Obviously, this was another mistake that only made my situation worse. At some point, I was at rock bottom. No money, no family support, no prospects. And that's when I started to rethink my life. I realized that for years I had been taking the path of least resistance, expecting other people to solve my problems. I never took responsibility for my decisions, never thought about the consequences of my actions on other people. Now I'm trying to change that. I got a regular job as a waiter at one of the casinos. For the first time in my life, I'm earning every dollar with honest labor. I also started attending Gamblers Anonymous groups to deal with my gambling addiction. I am not looking for forgiveness or understanding. I just wanted you to know your decision to call off the wedding, as painful as it was at the time, ultimately led to positive change, at least for me. I don't know if you are in touch with Prudence now, and I'm not asking you to pass anything on to her from me. But if you ever get the chance, please tell her that I regret my behavior and hope she has or will find the happiness she deserves. Sincerely, Clive Huxley. I reread the letter twice, trying to make sense of everything it said. A strange feeling came over me. Not satisfaction that I was right, but rather sadness at the confirmation that my daughter had been manipulated by a man who had taken advantage of her feelings. And yet there was something reassuring in that letter. The idea that even Clive, a man I thought was hopeless, could find the strength to rethink his life was hopeful. If he could change, then maybe in time Prue would be able to see things in a different light. I folded the letter neatly and returned it to the envelope. Maybe someday I'd show it to Prue. But not now. Right now the wound was still too fresh, and such revelations would only cause her more pain. Buddy, as if sensing my mood, laid his head in my lap. I absent-mindedly stroked his soft golden fur, looking out at the ocean. The waves came and went as they always did. There was a wisdom in their perpetual motion, accepting change, letting go and moving on. Maybe that was the main lesson of the last few months. I didn't know if Prue would ever forgive me. I didn't know if our relationship would ever return to what it once was, or even a semblance of normal communication. But I knew I'd made the right choice. Hard, painful, but the right one. Because sometimes love means being able to say no, even if it hurts. Sometimes love requires the strength to do what is necessary, not what feels good or easy. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing a dear one to face the consequences of their decisions so they can grow and become stronger. I didn't know if Prue would ever realize this, but I hoped that one day she would realize everything I did out of love. A mother's imperfect, sometimes misguided, but always sincere and deep love for her only child. And in the meantime, while I had my little white cottage by the ocean, I had my new friends and my new hobbies. There was faithful Buddy, who never judged and was always happy to be in my presence. There was a whole new life that I had started at an age when many people think the time for beginnings is past. I folded Clive's letter and put it away in my desk drawer. Then I took Buddy's leash. Come on, boy, I said. Let's go to the ocean. It was too beautiful a day to spend thinking about the past and the future. The future is always full of possibilities, even when you're 73.